Welcome in to the Energy Tech Podcast presented by Opsite Energy. Today we join co-host Mike Flores to talk about bridging the IT-OT divide by discussing the challenges of integrating IT and OT systems.
Awesome. Hey, Jeff, I am your co-host. I'm Mike with the Energy Tech Podcast, and I've got some great special guests. We got a lot to get to, and let's start over with our guest. And number one is Jason White with IDM. Jason, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you.
It's good to be here, Mike. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, man. And of course, we've got DJ Melancon with Tosibox in the house, right?
Back again. That's
one
right.
of our special guests. Now, just kind of for the viewers that are tuning into us, just kind of give us your 30-second commercial, Jason, about what you do and, you know, how we're going to kind of talk a little bit about OT, IT, cybersecurity, and Tosibox.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. So I'm the OT systems engineer at IDM. Work in the automation, networking, cybersecurity space with IDM. So handle everything from the OT networks to integrating Ignition and other platforms into automation and, you know, connecting all the dots, so putting it all together.
How long have you been doing this, man? For a while?
All close to 15 years, Mike.
15 years. Awesome. And where are you coming to us from?
So I'm coming to you from beautiful Tennessee.
Tennessee. Awesome. What a place. You know, it's not the great state of Texas, but it is Tennessee. You know, they did help us out. I love those guys from Tennessee. Good to have you, Jason. And, of course, DJ Melancon with Tosibox. DJ, kind of give us your 30-second intro, man, about what you do at Tosibox and you.
Born and raised in Vidor, Texas, America. Vidor, Texas, America. Live in Austin, senior national account manager, senior national sales manager.
Is that anywhere close to the Gulf of America?
It is right
yeah.
around the corner from the Gulf of America. Yes,
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for you. But yeah, no, I focus primarily on the oil and gas energy sector for Tosibox. Also work and handle water and wastewater and the industrial automation era as well. So that's kind of it. That's the highlight of Tosi.
Wow.
Me with Tosi.
Well, you know, and so, you know, having these guys here, it gives us a backdrop of what we're going to talk about. And part of that is IT, OT, cybersecurity, and we're going to focus on Tosibox. But before we do that, I kind of want to share a couple of numbers which kind of puts this conversation into perspective, okay? So number one, there was a 114% increase of cybersecurity attacks that were observed in the OT space alone from 2023 to 2024. So the attack, in that attack space, it went from 420 million to 900 million. Another number, 88% of OT leaders, this is anybody that's a director and up, has at least suffered some sort of cyber attack in 2024, all right? So that's a big deal. 26% of organizations still lack an adequate network monitoring solution in their OT space. So that's still a 1 in 4 number. And here's an interesting one. Modbus, this is from the FBI, Modbus continues to dominate the OT attack space. So that initial protocol that we all love to use because it's easy accounts for 40% of all attack vectors in the OT space. And so there's a 45% year-over-year growth of IoT cyber attacks just in 2023 to 2024. So that's a big number, right?
Yep.
Coming across that. And, you know, Jason, you've been in this kind of the same space I have, which is industrial IoT and energy. So kind of from your perspective, tell me a little bit about what you're seeing out there in the field as well in terms of just in relation to some of those numbers.
Well, yeah, Mike, so our critical infrastructure is under attack. I mean, as we've known for some time, I mean, you have nation-state APTs that are targeting, and it's not a if you've been attacked, it's going to be a win, more or less, what's going on nowadays. So one of the things, you mentioned Modbus, that has come out over time, you know, is Modbus Secure. You know, it's kind of wrapping that in a TLS encryption, encapsulating, you know, Modbus, which is a lot more secure. Right. You know, and then leveraging platforms like Tosibox, as we'll get to here in a little bit, you know, can alleviate a lot of that. So there's a lot of secure. There's a lot of groups out there that don't have a mature security posture. They still have a lot of flat networks, internet-facing OT devices.
Right.
Asset inventory is a big deal. People have no idea what some of these assets are. BYOD. As an OT, if a switch goes out in the middle of the night or something, the guys, they go to Walmart, grab what they can, or go to Best Buy, put it in. They don't know if they're pointing it towards the internet or not.
Right.
So that's one of the things we're still seeing and fighting to this day.
Yeah. So that's a big deal. So, in your experience, then, what I'm hearing is that you have a different type of technical persona that's out there in the field doing this work. When you talk about IT, again, you have roles. You've got, a person that's involved typically in systems. You've got a DB admin. You've got a data engineer. So you kind of have these solid roles. But would you agree that on the OT side of the space, that might be relegated to someone that's maybe an automation tech
Yep.
who also handles measurement? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, even in IDM, we do that sometimes. We have our automation engineers are having to, carry the burden of being the database admin, the integrator, the network guy, and a lot of times cybersecurity gets thrown on those people, and most automation engineers don't have, they think of security, but not the way, most people should think about it. Everything's changed a lot from 10 to 15 years ago now. There's a lot of APTs, as we were talking about, that are hanging out in these networks waiting. The FBI and other places have posted, CISA and all these have talked about, these APTs hanging out in these environments just waiting. So if we try to react to some global event or something like that, they can react as they need to. So
Yeah. So we gave you kind of the backdrop of what's happening in terms of the numbers. So when you really look at it, you have a person, someone that where sometimes cybersecurity isn't top of mind. You want it to be, but it isn't. You've got a limited number of personnel. You want to be able to put in their hands a product that is fit for purpose in the field, right? The second thing is you want it to be able to integrate quickly. And the other thing is to provide the cyber hygiene you need right away, right? So enter in Tosibox. DJ, kind of fill us in on what Tosibox is as far as the device and its platform and why it kind of fits what we're even talking about.
Yeah, Tosibox is a secure connectivity platform specifically designed for the OT space.
Yeah.
So kind of to Jason's point, and what we're talking about is essentially it takes those secure forms of network that protect your network from the outside world. Okay, and when we're talking about the outside world, that's someone being able to find a static IP that's open in a network that's on the internet and being able to port forward or get access into your network, right? So it's specifically designed to automatically embed industry-leading cybersecurity the moment that you plug it in. So even someone that has no certifications and no IT background or no networking background, they can have one of these things configured and plugged into their network and rebuild a network that's been lost or add in new sites, or as they make acquisitions or mergers and acquisitions, they can bring in new facilities into their network. A minimum amount of mind share and labor time in order to be able to do that, because that is probably one of the biggest issues in the space is you have people that are in the field with extremely remote assets. You're talking about the closest store to a field site is 80 miles away. You can't just have someone fly out and drive out and someone that's on the IT team come out and fix that all the time, and you need that piece of equipment up and running and sharing data immediately.
So break it down. Give us kind of the, when I think of Tosibox, I think of about a few components that make sense for the product, right? So you're not just getting an appliance. Kind of break that down. Maybe there's a few component pieces to Tosibox that make it a really cool tool.
Yeah, so essentially there's three components to the Tosibox platform. There's the hub, which is a virtual machine that can be hosted anywhere. And in most instances where you're going to host the hub is going to be where you're collecting data.
Right.
So whether that's AWS or Azure, or maybe you have an on-prem data center, maybe you're colo with someone else, another company that you've done an acquisition with or a merger with. That's where the hub's going to be hosted, and that's a firewalled virtual machine that is basically a central VPN aggregator. So if you think about a wagon wheel, it's the hub of the hub and spokes. The next component of the platform is actually what's sitting right here on the table. It's bringing sites into the network.
Right.
You literally take this, plug it into 9 to 50 volt DC power, give it any combination of internet access, plug it into your Ethernet capable devices, and the main thing that you're going to configure in it is what is the IP scheme of the devices you're connecting to. If everything's a 192.168.10,
Right.
you're going to put this on that same network, and it's going to automatically populate the devices it's connected to. This is also going to automatically build a firewall, take away all inbound ports, public-facing static IPs. It changes to dynamic. So it's creating your own private infrastructure the moment you plug it in. That's not something you have to configure or even know how to configure. It does it automatically.
Wow.
Bringing those sites into your hub is literally as simple as checking boxes. We actually just did it earlier.
Yeah. I mean, we bridged the Toshi 675 to my 5 gig hotspot. Just to set it up to get it brought into our VCL, and it took 2-3 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, it took longer to screw the antennas in than it really did to connect it.
Yeah.
So
It's super simple.
So we've got the components of the product for Tosibox. It's simplicity to install.
Yep.
So Jason, what you're saying is, hey, look, I'm out of the box. What would that time look like? Just
a few minutes, and that takes away what I had mentioned earlier. The tech going to Best Buy, and because the biggest part of it is, and I'm pretty passionate about this. People have lost, especially in OT, they've lost trust in some of the IT groups that manage them. I mean, those guys don't answer the phone the same way we do. I mean, most of the time we're 24 hours.
Right.
We got to keep production going, and that's how money's made. And that's what happens in the OT space. So they've lost trust in those people. So they do what I said, like going to BYOD, bringing their own device, plugging something in. I mean, this was so simple to set up. I literally, just on purpose, which I've set up plenty of these, read the instructions from the beginning to the end, and it still only took a few minutes, because I'd never bridged one to a portable hotspot. I'm talking about like a Verizon 5G hotspot, just bridged it to it, gave it the, SSID, the password in it, boom, it was up, And then, of course, like DJ said, you maintain the IP addresses on the back end that you want, your DHCP range, and then it can match your subnet that you have, your control network, or whatever you wind up doing, And it's easy. It just hands out IPs as you connect, and then it also, like DJ said, it has all the assets that are downstream of this. So you start seeing IP addresses and MAC addresses instantly, which I'm sure it sends out, ARP requests, pinging all this stuff on the network, and brings that in. Which I think DJ's going to talk about this in a little bit, but something they're going to leverage a new technology on the back end soon with that too. So, which is exciting.
Yeah. So from your perspective, Jason, then what in your mind, you've got quite a few already, but what challenge sticks out for you in the OT space that you think Tosibox solves almost immediately?
I mean, configurability, and then the ruggedness. You see that thing. I mean, we can put it in any environment, really. I mean, we put them all over the place. We've got some of these sitting in panels on the Houston ship channel, with little antennas and boxes. I mean, the ruggedness of it, and then the versatility. I mean, we can go 24, we can do 120 to 24. I mean, you can configure those things however you want to. I mean, you can even make them wireless access points too, so you can have an OT Wi-Fi network, that we've leveraged before for ignition and mobile clients and all that stuff. So it's just the usability 100%, because if you wanted to get these configured, which, we've had a customer who did that for, of course, Toshi set up, 100 of them, and we had 2 per site set up the same way. So if this thing goes out, they've got the spare sitting on the shelf, they plug it in, it's already configured, ready to roll, and boom, you're back up in no time.
Yeah.
Especially if you're bridging other sites together using this as point-to-point VPN. That's the big thing. If it's remote access, you can kind of wait a little while and stuff like that. But the point-to-point VPNing that we're using that with other clients, that has to get up quick, And I think we're minimal downtime, 10, 15 minutes. So it's easy for, like you said, a tech or an automations engineer to take these off the shelf and power them up and get them set up and roll with it. And I mean, because the instructions out of the box are super simple to follow. And I mean, there's even videos on YouTube. So,
Wow. So, DJ, from your perspective, you I know, just being in the business, Jason and I have seen this, and you've got multiple clients, and specific to the energy space, even in water, wastewater, even, is that what you're seeing? Kind of the same level of, hey, it's a challenge, and you think Tosibox is bridging the gap to that?
100%. The biggest three challenges in the OT space have been the same since I started working with Tosibox 7 years ago when I was at the Brady Waters company. So it was cost, complexity, and cybersecurity. Those were the three biggest instances. Of course, at that time, cybersecurity was not cared about in the OT space. It was, I just need to get connected. I need to get remote access, and I need something that's not going to cost an arm and a leg to do it.
Yeah.
Availability. Yep.
And has the availability. I can literally call you, and within a week, I've got what I need, and I can have my network set up, and it's running.
Right.
So those have been the biggest challenges. And traditionally, in the way that we tried to solve OT networking was by using traditional IT equipment that doesn't necessarily work with the protocols. You have to go through certification processes in order to actually be able to set it up. You have to have someone that's either a third-party IT company or a system integrator that has those certifications, or you have to have someone on staff that you're paying that can do that.
Right.
And depending on the size and scale of your network, at a smaller municipality, like a mud district, that you may only have, 15, 20 lift stations.
Right.
It's not that big of a deal. Right. You can make it work. But when you're talking about 200, 300, 700, well sites that you're trying to maintain connectivity, and things happen, lightning strikes, and you lose a couple of sites, right? It becomes a lot less feasible.
Right.
But those have been the main issues across the board, and complexity, by far, in my opinion, has been the number one issue.
Yeah. So let's you carved out a really good path for us as we go on here. Let's talk about the three, because that's really good. Let's talk about cost first. Mm-hmm. So number one, I know Tosibox has its proof of concept program.
Yep.
So there is a proof of concept program. So if you listen in and you're an automation tech, I&E tech, you're a production foreman, you're someone that has a small budget, and you want to test a product, Tosibox will do that. There's a proof of concept initiative there for you to do that at low cost to get that started. The interesting thing about cost as well is that what we're seeing I want to converge the two, because in IT, there is a cost. If I want to go out and I want to grab anybody's product, it doesn't matter who it is, and it doesn't matter if it's Cisco, Palo Alto, Fortinet. Really, there's a product line. There's a large, I call it a paywall to the product to get your hands on it in order to deploy it, no matter how you buy it. There's a certification piece to go with it. And sometimes if you're converging that in your OT space and you're in, let's say you're not a super major, like these large energy companies, it's easy to hide $1 million project. But when you are a small 100 well producer in West Texas that wants to leverage this product, I think that when it comes to cost, Tosibox fits that bill. Do you guys agree?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, because excuse me, whenever you're talking about cost, it's not just, a lot of times when you're trying to say apples to apples, it's really apples to oranges, right? Because the cost is not just factoring in the actual cost of the equipment. It's also, how long does it take to deploy each site?
Yeah.
Because that's engineering hours. How much is the support? How much is the annual fee? Everyone's moving this direction, right? But I had a customer application one time where no one gets fired for using Cisco. You know what I mean? No one gets fired for using Cisco. Everyone knows Cisco or Fortinet or Palo Alto. They're the majors of the world in this space. But a company that no one's heard of, or maybe only a few people have heard of, that's a different story. It's more of a risk, right? But then whenever I called the system integrator and I was just asking, because they do a lot of Cisco deployments, and I was like, I'm just curious, what is the setup like per site using a Cisco Meraki? And he said it's anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a site, right? By the time I configure in house, and then I bring it out in the field, and then I deploy it in the field, and That's not considering drive time.
Yeah.
It takes 5 minutes with a Tosibox. So if you're taking 6 to 8 hours, we'll just say 6 over 100 sites, that's 600 hours.
Yeah.
How much is in an hour for having someone that actually is going to do that configuration? It's anywhere from $100 to $250 an hour. That's also factored into cost.
So the point here is you've got the time to value is the addition of person hours, man hours, person hours, whatever word you want to use, is an accumulated number per site. And when you do the math, that is a large number. I think, Jason, you've seen that in your deployments with other products as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, in terms of time. So, all right, we talked about cost. Now let's talk about complexity, and let's relate the two, okay? Because you've got lots of convergence with IT, OT, lots of companies. And when I use the word convergence, what I really mean is that you have an IT person responsible for OT responsibilities, and you have a person with limited knowledge handling IT stuff, right, on the OT side. So, and there is the delineation or the bifurcation of the two, right? And DJ, you and I were talking earlier. In my mind, IT represents security. And you're saying, hey, it represents the part of the business, right? It's the business side of the company, the accounting, the ERP, the MES, even at that level, if you're in manufacturing, where on the OT side, this is now where I'm at the sensor level. This is your typical ISA 18.5 look, you know, what you're looking at sensor level into the SCADA platform. And then in some cases, you've got that DMZ, right? The PLC, and then into, after that, you move up into the SCADA, the DCS platform. And then you've got this DMZ situation that happens a lot of times. What we're recognizing, and Jason, you can even speak to this, is that there's a convergence there where the DMZ is sort of being pushed out in favor of things like the unified namespace or other IoT infrastructures, right? Where complexity, in my mind, is changing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the convergence is only because a lot of the technology down in the OT space is a lot of the IT technology, you know, and with that comes the same potentials for threats and, you know, hackers to be able to utilize those type of resources. I mean, all your stuff internal down in level 3 and 2, I mean, you have Windows machines and all that stuff. So that's where a lot of the IT groups take over some of the OT stuff. And, and the convergence it's been a bumpy road, but I think we're getting closer and closer there. But yeah.
So now that's cost. I mean, that's complexity, right? So in terms of complexity, I want to bring this back to Tosibox because when it comes to complexity, it is an out-of-the-box solution that provides a few things. Number one, when I think of we'll talk about cybersecurity in a second, but it's ease of installation, right? So total time, what I call a total time to value. It doesn't require a Pearson VUE certification to use the product, right? It's training that a person needs in the field because what you're seeing is lots of what we call merger and acquisition scenarios. Complexity has to be out the window. What I mean by that is if I'm a producer or if I'm a midstream company and I go and I assume another asset, and let's say that you've launched Ignition, but they also have a Wonderware platform that's legacy. You want to be able to add that that M&A, that merger and acquisition product, and I think you can do that quickly with Tosibox. So in that scenario, DJ, what do you think someone can do with Tosibox if they're in that kind of scenario?
In the upstream world, this comes up almost every single day. Yeah, like every single day, because you may buy a field or the field that you start out with, and then you start building out your network, and then you decide, for example, that you're going to run Ignition from Inductive Automation. That's going to be the SCADA platform you're going to use, and it's going to be hosted in AWS. Okay, this is just an example. And then somewhere along the way, another field comes up, and you make another acquisition, and that field was using a different type of network. Maybe it's a private APN network, which is different from your initial TOSI network. And they're using ZI from Emerson, which is hosted in Azure. Okay, and then they buy another field, and that field was using ZD SCADA. The company as a whole whenever you make that acquisition, you still have to use that SCADA system until you can get everything migrated over into whatever you're going to name as your primary. And that may be any one of those three, or you may just say, hey, we started with ignition. We want to continue to go with ignition. One of the issues that we've helped take a lot of the stress out via using Tosibox is with the hubs, with the hub and edge nodes in a very real world scenario that's come up with, multiple companies that we work with, is they'll host their hub in our tier 4 global SOC 2 compliant data center.
Right.
And then from there, we'll build IPsec tunnels, instead of from each individual site having to connect to each one of those different SCADA applications, they'll build one tunnel going to ZD SCADA, one tunnel going to ZI, one tunnel going to the AWS environment where Ignition lives. And then from there, every site that you add in, once that back-end infrastructure is built, which takes literal minutes, the longest portion of it's building the IPsec tunnels. It's not deploying the Tosibox portion, is adding edge nodes. So every site, they just go in and drop an edge node, connect it to their hub, check the box. It builds a point-to-point 256-bit encrypted VPN tunnel to their hub. And then in the hub, this is kind of another beautiful part of the hub software itself, is there are things called access groups.
Right.
In those access groups, you would point it to, this one's called access group for ZD SCADA. This one's for ZI. This one's for Ignition. And you point it to the IP of that IPsec tunnel. And then once all of those groups have been built, every time you drop a new site in, you just drag that edge node into that access group. And if it needs to go to ZD SCADA and Ignition at the same time, you just drag it into both groups. And you're passing data in real time to both applications. And so you can still use the legacy system that was from the acquisition you just made, while also slowly merging it over into your primary. And eventually being able to have everything in one single pane of glass. That's the main goal of 99% of customers I talk to right now, is they want to be able to see everything from a global or regional standpoint and have it all in one view.
Right.
And that's the simplicity of the Tosibox platform has just cut down drastically on the amount of time it takes to do that with traditional means.
Yeah.
And just quick disclaimer on our conversation earlier, but you can build these same type of networks using a Cisco, Fortinet, Palo Alto, Sierra, PepWave, whatever. The difference is you have to build it.
Right.
It's the automation. And so there's no knocking on those platforms because they've been used for a long time, but the whole beauty of Tosibox itself is just automation.
Yeah. So you got a listener that's saying, or I would imagine someone's thinking, no, that's kind of sounds like a too good to be true scenario. Or if I'm the IT guy, that sounds too good to be true. What? You're building this tool. Jason, in your experience, is it a stretch? Is it a stretch for what DJ's talking about?
Oh no, and like you said, you can use Fortinet, or we can use Palo Alto, or whatever. But when it comes to giving the digital keys to give people access to, we set up 10 in about 2 or 3 minutes, and you distribute them out via email. The guys open the Tosi software, put the key in, boom, they have access, and then you can access control them by those user groups. They get access to whichever locks you want to give them, and in the time we gave 10 people the ability to hit 2 or 3 different locks, it would take to build one VPN client for in a Palo Alto or something, and then you've got to walk them through how to download Global Protect and all these other things, and it's just all we do is email them a key and they put it in the software and boom, and it even comes with the link on how to install the software. So
wow, yeah, so
super simple.
So it sounds like complexities check the box. Let's kind of talk a minute about cybersecurity. So in terms of the cyber side, again, I'm the IT guy or IT person. I'm saying this sounds too good to be true. Walk me through some of those cybersecurity challenges that you think Tosibox DJ has sort of in its product line has said, hey, we've addressed this and this is covered.
Yeah, so if you want to break down whether you're talking about like NIST framework
Sure.
2.0 or the TSA cybersecurity guidelines, or even for water and wastewater, there's Water ISAC, basically came out with the exact same guidelines that TSA came out with. Right. The main segments that they're discussing is used to when we talked about this IT/OT convergence piece is it was all about segmenting IT from OT. For one, it's very rare case that an IT system should be reaching into the OC side of the network. The OT should be pushing data out to the IT side, right? So you want to have that segmentation. But, you know, when TSA came out with their regulations, they also started talking about zones, you know, creating zone network segmentation. So if you just have one segment and all of your hypercritical assets, and when we start talking about critical assets, it's how long can we lose access to this piece of equipment before things hit the fan? And if it's 10 seconds, that's a hypercritical asset. If it's a camera that's facing a parking lot that it doesn't really matter if it's there or not, it's not really a critical asset, right? But making sure that all of your critical assets are not also in the same segment. So placing firewalls and you can even go into micro segmentation with VLANs and separating and segmenting out even further. But so network segmentation, huge piece. User access control, making sure people only have access to what they need access to in the network. No shared accounts. The only shared accounts that should be available is if it's in a control room. And as soon as someone that is no longer on that control room team, you have to change everything to only the people that are allowed to have access to that one instance. But everyone else, they need their own secure network and their own secure access, and it lists out multi-factor authentication on every single page.
Yeah.
You know, so there's multiple means of doing MFA. The 3 factors of authentication is knowledge-based, it's physical possession-based, and it's self-based. 2 of those factors is multi-factor authentication. So that means having something and knowing something. Or, you know, your phone, you're having something and it's taking an image of yourself to get access into it. That's technically a form of multi-factor authentication. Another portion is having encryption and the highest level of encryption that we can have available right now. You know, so where Tosibox, it's all of that is automatically embedded. We're not talking about like internal asset monitoring and deep packet inspection, but protecting your network from the outside world. Every edge node you deploy is a firewall. And it's automatically going to segment all the devices behind it. Every user you give access to is physical first multi-factor authentication. So you're going to send them access, like Jason was just saying. Whenever he's sending that access that we did 10 in 3 minutes, you're actually choosing the device someone has access from. So they can't just pull any random computer in a public library and get access to your network. It's the device you chose, whether it's a phone, tablet, laptop, desktop. And then they're going to create their password, and then you're going to check the boxes and restrict their access down to the port, protocol, IP, MAC ID level, time restricted. That's on the user access side. And then,
so what you're talking about, you know, strategically, there's a defense in depth posture that you have. Right. And so, Jason, you know, you're one of the rare, I call you like the rarest OT guy that really gets the defense in depth strategy, right? And so in your mind, when you think about this with Tosibox, kind of tell me where you think Tosibox fits in that strategy.
Well, I mean, DJ kind of hit on zones, and going back to, 62443, talking about zones and conduits and all that. I mean, and then also control and access. Like you said, we gave somebody a lock, a digital lock, and then we picked which devices, and you can even limit the amount of devices that they are access to inside that subnet, So it's zero trust, access to least privilege, I mean, we're just checking all the boxes. And then there's logging that is available, so you can see when people hit certain VPNs and when they access certain devices.
Yeah.
I mean, it's solid. I mean, I really like Tosibox, and it's a good product. So
Yeah. So we kind of check those boxes. So we did, you talk about those things, cost, complexity, cybersecurity. So let's bring it home one time just for a recent project we're doing. So we're coming to you as one of our partners, which is CNX Resources. We're moving to deploy the product. If you're listening in, you're going to want to stay tuned because we're going to pick up an episode with the CNX team as well and kind of talk about the challenge they have. And one of those challenges is leveraging remote devices with Tosibox, because that's great. Okay, I take the box and I go set this thing at a plant that doesn't move. Great. It's not human. Hey, everything's behind that plant. Good job. But what about a human that's running around with a laptop in the field and this person has to get to multi-sites?
or an iPad.
Yeah, an iPad, exactly. So kind of, Jason, walk us through the challenge for CNX and what Tosibox is doing there, in terms of not just its 675, but its additional digital features and keys.
Yeah, so I mean, we're going to be slapping this in a DMZ more or less because we have a lot of external connections that are going on. But like you had hit, I mean, we're going to be leveraging Ignition perspective, and we're going to have multiple techs and client, people with leveraging the iPads, and with the mobile lock through Tosibox, we're able to solve that problem. CNX came to us with a problem that they wanted to be able to access the Ignition application via mobile, and we were trying to upgrade the security posture of CNX. So we created, a para-reference network architecture,
Right.
with a fully functional DMZ, and we're throwing this in its own subnet, allowing all these guys to have iPads, laptops, whatever, and we're giving them digital locks or digital keys. And it's solving the problem with remote access. I mean, because if not, that would say now they're talking about 50 to 60 plus users. Imagine building that many users in Palo Alto, which was what we had
Right.
originally had designed, because we weren't thinking that there was going to be that many mobile users. But with the power of Ignition and Perspective and their mobile app, along with the Toshi mobile key, we meshed that together, and it's gonna be great. So
Yeah. So you hit on something. Two things. Number one is remote capabilities is part of the not just the IT/OT convergence, but technology as a whole. So it really doesn't matter. Statistically, 82% of users leverage their mobile device. 82% of users on any given application leverage their mobile device, iPad and phone. That smaller number is your total PC users. And typically in this space, we're talking control room operators. So mobility is a big deal. The second thing is data at the edge, right?
Yeah.
So that is the other challenge, aside from what we talked about for cost, aside from what we talked about a complexity and cybersecurity, mobility we just addressed, right?
Yeah.
And especially in this project. But the last piece is data at the edge, right? Everyone wants to get closer to it. You want to have computing power. You want to be able to collect, connect, right? Compute there at the edge as much as you can. So kind of looking ahead, DJ, give us maybe just a glimpse of what you think Tosibox is doing to address that.
That is a great segue. Yeah,
it's
so
our favorite part.
Yeah, this is my favorite part.
Yeah,
as well.
we've been talking about it for a while. So.
We have. Yeah, so we're actually kind of the way that we've worked with this in the past is someone would have an IPC from name the company, Advantag, Moxa. Yeah, name them.
All those guys.
Yeah, a lot of them. But basically, they would start deploying things like Ignition Edge or EACM from AutoSol or Node-RED or maybe a Nozomi or any of these other applications at the edge for local control.
Right.
And there are a lot of huge components to that. Is if you lose your connection to your cloud hosted environment, this is still collecting data for you, and it's still running that specific site based on what you've configured. It's also changing the amount of data that you're pushing to an environment. This is a huge development that has been around for a while, but has really started to see a lot of focus in the OT environment. The way we've been working with it in the past is Tosibox has still done what Tosibox has always done and secured that connection, but you had a different device to put all your applications on. What we're working on currently, and our technology team is currently beta testing and trying to get this thing out as quickly as possible, but it's still the full Tosibox suite, the firewall, the VPN connectivity, the user access control on the WAN side.
Right.
So full network management, connectivity management on the WAN side, but with room and compute and storage capacity to handle those applications on the LAN side.
Right.
That would be an all-in-one device. You know, and that's something that y'all have asked me 50 million times. Everyone at every trade show I've ever gone to has asked, "Can you do this?" And it's not yet, but it is coming, and it's very. I'm very excited about it because I've wanted this for a long time.
Well, you said something interesting. You said what I heard, I know you said it one way, but what I heard is Tosibox has stayed true and blue to its need to provide a secure product that takes out the complexity. So you're staying true to that. But what you're doing is you let the smoke clear for IoT. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah.
Is you let the smoke clear, and now you're saying, hey, here's some added on capability that's out there, and we're going to deliver something that already integrates the edge technologies and capabilities, a publish and subscribe modeling that is happening across the industry with IoT convergence, and now the delivery of this product that we're talking about, this beta version. So, I mean, Jason, from your perspective, how does that make you feel, and where do you see kind of some quick implementations?
Makes me feel very happy. And then the only thing we're missing is a pretty solid security fabric, right? So asset inventory and some vulnerability management, and you've got an all-in-one piece. But it solves a big problem that we've had, when it comes to edge designs. Like we said, putting like an OnLogix PC out there and then having to slap this next to it. No big deal, but we've always wanted a little more,
Right.
And I mean, and then you can also white label it too, which is a big deal. You can slap your sticker on the side of it, whatever, and it's an all-in-one piece that solves a big problem on the edge. So, and then coming hopefully with Ignition on board, and that's it jumps into that suite, with Ignition on board too. I mean, it's gonna be good.
Awesome.
It's gonna be easy, cost effective. I mean, it's gonna check all the boxes and then add some more boxes to be checked that we've been wanting in the OT space for a long time. So.
Wow. Well, it's good to have you guys on the show, right? Lots to talk about. And with checking those boxes, we want you to check that like button, right? And join us here on the podcast. You can follow us. So with that, I am your co-host, Mike Flores, with the Energy Tech Podcast. And don't forget to like, subscribe, check the box. We'll provide some links for Tosibox and catch us, because we're going to be having Jerry Reeves included with Tosibox, and we're going to add an additional episode, it looks like, because there's a lot to uncover with what Tosibox is doing in this space. Thank you. Awesome.
Yes.